Getting to the cabin. Great place to unwind. I like to read about rivers that I plan to run someday, or maybe edit some video, or just watch the birds. It's always nice to cook breakfast outside. Sure, I could do all this stuff at home, but it's more fun at a cabin. In this video, I'm going to show you a little bit of how I built the cabin and what I wanted in it. For this cabin, I wanted some solar power, just cheap panels and some lights and a place to sleep. I really wanted an outdoor kitchen that would be a permanent place to cook. And of course, you need an outhouse. So this video is basically just a condensed version of a year's worth of work. All the little things that's gone into the cabin site to make it a lot more fun to spend time here and building the cabin itself. I hope you guys enjoy. Took a little bit of tree clearing and a little bit of layout, but after that I was rolling. One thing I forgot to mention in the original video on this cabin is it's a 10 foot by 14 foot cabin. The walls are 10 feet tall. I completely forgot to mention the dimensions the first time. I built this cabin on posts. Each post sits on top of a concrete cookie in the bottom of the hole. There's lots of ways you can build a foundation for a cabin. Do whatever suits you. So I started off nailing the rim joist to the corner post. I eventually added some lags and then added vertical supports underneath the rim joist. It wasn't showing any signs of failure, and technically the wall sits on top of the posts, but it definitely doesn't hurt to reinforce something, make it last a little longer. This wall was so heavy, I really shouldn't have tried to do this by myself. I made it work, but definitely be better off to just sheet half of it and stand it, which would work easily, the bottom half of course, or just get some help. Pretty dangerous method. I wouldn't suggest it. And that is the scary part. Getting up there, if that fell, I'd be in a world of trouble. Now that's more like it. I noticed this dead ash tree out on the property, and I realized I could make some rafters out of it, and what I wanted was some exposed rafters, or partially exposed, something thick. So my plan was to cut 3-inch thick rafters. I outfitted this trailer with an old boat winch and was able to load the logs myself. It takes some work, but if you're creative, you can do it. So I took him over to my brother's house, and we ran him through his sawmill. It's a Harbor Freight mill. It's cheap, but surprisingly a nice mill. I used to have a sawmill myself. It was homemade. A cabinet maker made it, and he used it for years. It was pretty big. It's kind of unruly. It did a good job, but personally, I'd almost prefer having a small mill like this. Someday, I will definitely get another mill. This is what I ended up with. 3-inch thick, 8-inch tall ash beams. Pretty much exactly what I was hoping I could get. And that wall wasn't the only heavy thing on this job. These beams, they were pretty heavy. This cabin had to be kind of small so that it would fit in the area on the property that I wanted it to. So I went with a loft. I built the walls 10 feet tall to give me a little more headroom in the loft, and the bottom of the loft boards are around 6'8", so I've got plenty of headroom below it. These rafters are for the covered porch. I really wanted a covered porch on here so you could stay outside when it's raining or get out of the sun. Just a nice place to sit back and relax. And that's really all the cabin's about, is a place to relax. Enjoy your day. There's lots of ways to put up steel roofing. I didn't use the best method. The best method would probably be put purlins down where your screws are going to hit, sheet the purlins with OSB, and then put a synthetic underlayment underneath to keep all moisture out. These are the boards I used for the siding. They had a little mildew. They'd been sitting around a little too long. So what I did was stretch some ratchet straps out, clamped the boards at the end to the strap so it wouldn't flip over, and then I used 50/50 bleach water and killed all the mold and mildew, made them safe to use. My deck boards were rough sawn oak from our property. They looked nice, but they had to be stained, otherwise they'd rot out pretty quick. This might have been the most satisfying part of the build. It was so great to finally have stairs to just walk right in. This lumber pile is all pine. It's white pine that we had cut up from logs. I'm going to take it to the Amish, have them rip it down, plane it, and make it tongue and groove. I know it's not an option everybody has, but it does save a lot of money when you can do something like that. Same with this. These are oak. They were cut off the property. I use them for the loft floor, for the flooring for the cabin, and for the deck. I did run some wiring in the wall. I put 2 runs of 2 conductor 14 stranded for DC. That will power the LED lights and some USBs. And I also ran some Romex to power some 110 outlets. Something I could use for a fan or charging a laptop. Anything that needs AC. From where it sits. Installing the tongue and groove is probably one of my favorite parts of the build. It's when you really start to see what the inside of the cabin is going to look like. I was pretty happy with the way it turned out. This is the wire that will go from the battery to power my inverter. For the ceiling, I screwed nailers to each side of my rafters and nailed the tongue and groove to the nailers. The ceiling went really quick, with each piece of tongue and groove being cut to a short length. It's easy to handle. Here's the leftover boards from that ash tree that I used for beams. I'm going to turn that into trim. For the floor, I took this oak down to the Amish, had them rip it and plane it for me. I could have had them tongue and groove it, but I kind of like the look of a board floor, and it saved me a little more money. My wife found this stove on Marketplace. It's kind of hard to find a stove like this. It's got a shallow firebox, so it doesn't stick out from the wall very far. It's kind of perfect for this cabin. It had a little bit of surface rust, but that's not a bad project, and it saves you a lot of money. One of these stoves new would cost quite a bit. I like to heat the metal a little bit before I paint it, because although the room's warm, the metal's pretty cold. This might not be the greatest way to load a stove, but I guess when you're by yourself, you gotta be creative. And it worked for me. My chimney was 2 inches short, so I just added another set of pavers. Made it line up really well. I made my own batten strips. For that, I ripped the siding boards down into 2-inch wide pieces. These just cover the gaps between the siding. I think this live edge was a nice touch. It made a little more work because you had to mark each batten strip at the top and cut them individually, but I think it was worth it. I made all of the window casing and trim out of the same oak that I used for the flooring and the deck. It's pretty handy having that stuff around. And it saved quite a lot of money. And that's something it seems a lot of people would like to know, is how much something like this would cost. To be honest, I don't know. I saved so much money because I had all of that oak for the floor, for the loft floor, the deck, the trim. I had pine, and I turned that into tongue and groove, so I didn't really have to buy any tongue and groove, just a little bit for the ceiling. I bought the windows off the marketplace. I bought the doors off the marketplace, all used. I bought insulation that people had left over on marketplace. I actually bought the roof steel from a friend of mine who had it left over from a job. I got the stove on marketplace and restored it. The cherry I'm using to build this ladder right now, I have a whole stack of that. I've had it sitting around for years. So with all the places I saved money on this, I'm not really sure how much it would cost someone to build this if they just bought all the materials new. It ran me a little over $3,000. I would assume it would be somewhere in the range of $5,000 to $7,000, maybe. What I want to do with this ladder is make it spin and just sit against the wall. I'm going to just trace this block. So, by cutting this block at the same angle the ladder sits, it allows you to put a hinge from the block to the ladder. Without having this block, the hinge would never work. It's always a good idea to pre-drill your screw holes, but on a block this size, it's essential. If you don't, the screw will split the block. Slightly started with a hammer. Now I've got a little bit of trim to do. What I'm doing here is shaping this 2x4 to look like a log. I'm going to put this at the peak of the ceiling. I used some of my leftover tongue and groove to build a battery box.
Beautiful.
I put these little homemade hooks up to stow away my homemade folding table. I made the table out of leftover tongue and groove from the build, and I used some of the cherry that I used for the ladder for legs. At this point, I knew I wasn't done. I knew I had an outhouse to build and power and lots of other little projects to do, but I felt like I wanted a victory breakfast, and it was really enjoyable cooking over the wood stove. This cabin really needed an outhouse, so I cleared a spot, and I actually just raided a friend of mine's scrap pile to build the outhouse. I built it all out of leftovers from a shed building company. Normally I don't enjoy digging holes, but Charlie makes everything pretty entertaining. Goofy dog.
Is he helping or is he making it harder?
These logs were all cut-offs from railing posts that they used to make those little portable Amish sheds. I just ripped them in half on my table saw and used them for log siding. I pre-built as much as I could. I framed up the walls, I cut the log siding to length, and I built the door and just hauled it out almost done. That way I didn't have to do so much work on unlevel ground. After unloading, I laid out a couple 4x4s by the hole, make sure they're right distance apart and level, and then just start building. It was pretty nice having everything pre-built. All these walls went together really fast. Another really nice thing about it was not having to listen to the generator until it was time for the air compressor. The door is pretty simple. Just cut some boards down to the right width, build a little frame around it, throw some hinges on, And make sure you cut some shapes in it because it's an outhouse. People like stars and moons and trees in their outhouse doors. A foam seat is definitely better for the winter, but I was building this as cheap as I possibly could, and this seat was only $9. And a piece of foam's around $27, maybe more now. I closed up the gaps between the studs with leftover chunks of log. I didn't stain the outhouse right away. I like to use a pump sprayer, so I pulled the roof panels off so that I could spray it and not get stain on the edges of the panels. It only takes maybe 35 minutes to stain a building this size. Looks better and it's going to last a lot longer. The next thing I did was the electrical. I used 12-volt switches for the lights because they're 12-volt LED lights, so I had to make my own faceplates for the outlet boxes I used.
There we go.
I used these tape lights. They're just peel and stick. You can stick them to your ceiling, your rafters, your wall. They work really nice and they don't use a lot of power. I also installed some 12-volt USB outlets. I think anywhere you can stick to 12 volt and not have to use an inverter is going to save the charge in your battery. The panels I have are a Harbor Freight kit, and so far, honestly, they've done really well. They came with their own charge controller. The battery I'm using is a lead-acid marine battery. I'm probably going to be doing some upgrades really soon. I'll make sure to get a video out on that as well. Well, I've got power now, and I've got lights, but that loft looks pretty bare, and it needs some railing. I'm going to use birch logs for spindles and cherry for the handrails. The birch logs aren't straight, so you have to adjust them a little bit to get the tops and the bottoms to match up and be square. This railing was pretty easy to install. I just used some 1/4-inch lags with a nice decorative looking head on them, and I screwed the handrail down to each individual log spindle. Then I anchored each log spindle down to the loft, and the two ends I anchored directly to the wall. Turned out to be a very nice sturdy railing. Well, good. Now that that's a little safer, we need a heat shield for the stove, and for that I need a bunch of 1-inch spacers to hold the metal away from the wall so there's an air gap. I painted my heat shield with high temperature paint. You don't have to. Probably works better without it, honestly. Before I put this heat shield up, the walls really didn't get too hot. They wouldn't burn your hand. but they did start to seep some sap out, so they were getting warm enough. It's definitely better to be safe than sorry and get a heat shield up. Charlie doesn't care about heat shields. He cares about sticks. He's a lot happier when you're not burning them. He likes when you throw them. I needed a coat rack in the cabin, and I pretty much like to make everything myself. This piece of walnut worked perfect. It's got some nice character to it, pretty wood grain. Quick and easy little project. You want to stand back, take a peek? It's really starting to feel pretty cozy in this place. Let's take a little tour of the loft. Got my light switch there on the left. I put my lights across the back wall. That way they're not shining in your eyes when you're laying in bed. It's perfect for if you want to lay in bed and read a book. I would say I'm just about done with the cabin at this point. Something I want now is an outdoor kitchen. It gets pretty warm cooking over a wood stove in the summertime, and an outdoor kitchen is something I've always wanted to build. The process for building this was pretty simple. I picked a nice shady spot so I'd be out of the sun in the summertime when I'm cooking on this. Then I dug down, removed the topsoil and vegetation so you're building on a good solid base. Then I pulled out some 2x4s and made a little form. Set the form in the hole and made sure it was good and level and solid in place. Then just poured some concrete. Now, if you had your block and were all ready to go when you poured the concrete, you could probably set your first course of block right in the wet concrete after it's set up a little bit. But then you'd want to let it dry before you continued from there. To fill this center, I just dug a hole. I dug down past the topsoil and used the good sand below to fill the center up, making sure I packed it every 6 inches or so. Once I was done getting sand, I just filled the hole with all the topsoil that I dug out for the grill. After I finished the center, I filled the blocks with concrete. I don't know if it's necessary, but I thought it might help them hold up to heat better. One thing I would do a little differently, I would add another block underneath of this chimney. That way the pipe is a little bit higher and would draw smoke a little better. It still works, but it could be better. Also, I would line each firebox with fire brick or maybe some kind of cob mixture, something to keep a little less heat on the concrete blocks, because they will probably crumble over time from extreme heat. Although most of the time when you're cooking, you're only cooking for maybe half an hour, so really an hour's worth of fire at a time isn't going to affect them as well as, say, having a campfire in a concrete fire pit for several hours at a time. And then for the other side, I got this stainless steel griddle. I had a slab of pine, just needed to be cleaned up, and I used that for the countertop. Then I had to cut the grate down for the grill. It was a little too long, stuck out. I had to make some brackets to mount the countertop to the posts. And I painted them up, got them all nice so they wouldn't rust. My grate that I cut down fits about perfect. I had an old grill grate that I bent and made into a charcoal stand. Yeah, seemed to work nice. Gets the charcoal a little higher. Perfect. It's kind of funny. I built this with the idea of cooking outside when it's warm. But honestly, I enjoy cooking on this just as much, if not more, in the winter. It's great being out enjoying that crisp, clean winter air and cooking a nice breakfast over a fire. After breakfast, I had some shelves that I brought with me to mount. I think this is one of the last projects I'm going to do on the cabin. I do plan to upgrade the solar kit, and I have a few improvements in mind for the outdoor kitchen. But the cabin itself, I think it's about right. Well, I think that about does it for me. I'm going to enjoy my nap. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think I'll leave you with some bird feeder action. See you next time.